I got a Toyota Tundra today, like 140,000 miles on it. It's making a popping noise. They took it in, the guy said he put ball joints on it, it's fixed, but it's still making a popping noise. So, not surprisingly, there's a lot of idiots out there pretending to be mechanics. First thing you want to do is jack it up, check for play. So, jack it up! It's just rear wheel drive, so just normal suspension. Well, there's no particular play here. Let's take the wheel off and see if they actually did anything. So we're gonna start looking around here. They certainly didn't put an upper ball joint on because it's rusty as can be. That's the original one. You can see the boot on the bottom there. They didn't change the bottom one either. Okay, so when they lied to them, what they actually changed, you can see the bolt on the stabilizer bar that holds the stabilizer bar has a grease fitting. They don't come with grease fittings, so all they did was replace this. Now we still have the original ball joints, the original lower control arm. It could be getting noise from any of those. It's not anything that's structurally shot, and the shock itself, it looks to be the original one, but the bushings are still in pretty good shape. Good way to check ball joints. They kind of need to be loaded, unless they're really worn out. So get yourself a long screwdriver, put it under the ball joint, pry on it. There's no play. And we'll try the top one, do the same thing. There's no play, so they're not really worn. So I'll put this wheel back on and check the other side. But before we do that, check out the tire. It's balled on the inside, not on the outside. The front end alignment on this thing is way off. It's going to need an alignment for sure. They only wear like that if the alignment's off. Look at the other tires to see what it's doing. Now you can see this one is a little bit more worn this than that. You can see it's still wearing on the inside. The alignment's way off. But this tire isn't completely shot. That one is. This tire's not even safe to drive on. But there's obviously an alignment problem. Now we'll put this tire back on. Get it right, we'll get 75 foot-pound of torque. Make sure they're just the right tightness. Now check the other side. So we'll jack this side up, see if there's any obvious wear. Not really. Then we'll take the wheel off. It's pretty much what I expected. It's had the torsion bar bolt replaced. It's got one with a fitting. But we look at the ball joint, it's still old on the top one. And we'll look at the bottom one, it's still old. You can see the grease seal on the bottom is old. Now they got charged $200 for putting on a couple of bolts. But I've seen a lot worse. I've seen people spend $2,000 for something like that. They included their analysis and stuff. Well, pretty crappy analysis. Nothing really structurally wrong with it. As we see here, when we load that ball joint, it doesn't move. And we'll go to the bottom ball joint. We'll do the same thing. Pry on it. Prying. It doesn't move either. With age, everything gets a little bit worn. There's nothing actually worn out. All the rubbers are still there. You just often will get some kind of noise because they don't have grease fittings in them anymore. That's not making any noise either. Sure, there's superficial rust on this stuff, but you're gonna often get little bits of noises while you're driving down the road on a vehicle that says, oh, realize this thing is 16 years old. You're gonna get noises when it's 16. We're gonna take it for a ride, see how structural it is. Put the wheel back on. When you torque the wheel down, have it on the ground, then it won't move. It's a lot easier that way. But before we take you for a ride, guys trying to sell them everything kitchen sink. So we'll put the scan tools. Now we got it plugged in down here. And as you can see, this baby's got 163,791 miles. Not that much for a Tundra. 6, read it all. Knows it's a Tundra. And we'll do an automatic scan. You can see the good thing's engine's fine. It's got ABS track problems, tire pressure monitoring, it's probably to do with the ABS, and the airbag. If the ABS system is working on the airbags, it'll trip those codes. So that stuff, we really don't care. What we want to look at is the engine to see what shape it's in. Live data, there's no codes, but the live data is going to give us a lot of information. Let's start analyzing this stuff. Everything's good and blue so far. What we want to look at is some of the data to see how this thing is really running. Now the short-term fuel trim, it's 8.5. It's adding fuel, I mean it's running lean on both sides. So I would say it's time to clean the mass airflow sensor. That'd be the main, because they're both following exactly the same. And if both terms, see that's 7.8 and that was 8.5, they're both up high. And they're exactly the same. Now it's 8.5, 7.8. They're very close. That means that it's running lean. And one thing that's going to make it run lean is a bad mass airflow sensor. One that's dirty, just needs cleaning. You can see the timing chain's in good shape. The timing's pretty stable, 10 degrees. Misfires, spark plugs are fine. All late, 0 misfires. So I'll take it for a spin, and as long as we're here, you can see it's got this stupid maintenance required light on, maintenance required. Well, what you do with that is this. Turn the key off. Turn it to the on position, not running, all right? Then you get to the little knob here, and you hold it down and turn the key off again. Then with it still held down, you hold it down, turn the key on again. Doesn't have that obnoxious little thing over there now. And as you can see now, the maintenance required light is off. That's how you turn them off. It's very simple. Now the maintenance required will come on and turn off. It's supposed to do that, but it was staying on. And we know that the tire pressure monitoring system isn't working. He doesn't care. He's not going to pay for new batteries or new sensors. He doesn't care. He uses air gauge to measure the pressure. While we're waiting for them to back their car out of the way, I almost ran into it. We will find this thing idles really smooth. Not shaking at all. Now I turned it and I can hear it. I heard the noise. Let's see if it'll do it again. There it is. We'll get back to that. We're going to take it for a road test first. Got plenty of pickup. It's a big, heavy truck. It drives like a truck. I mean, you're going to feel like you're driving a truck because it is a truck. We'll see if it'll make the noise now. There it goes. It's definitely in the left front in the suspension system. Now I know it sounds horrible, but my grandson's does the same thing. Basically, since they don't have grease fittings, you got bushings. The rubber bushings get worn and they creak on the metal. All right, here we go. Okay, keep going. Coming from the shock. Now we get some WD-40, and what we're gonna do is, on the top here, the insulator is making a clunking noise. The metal's kind of rubbing on the metal. You want to do the bottom too. You want to spray it good, let it soak a while. Now my grandson's Tundra does the same exact thing, even on the same side. That's just the shock. Well, the shock has that big coil spring inside, and inside that there's rubber insulator, so the rubber spring, instead of sitting on bare metal, it sits on a little rubber insulator, and then that's on metal. They wear out over time, so it sounds horrible, but when you turn it the whole way, it's just a little spring clicking, going clink on the bottom. And the reason it's when you turn it, because when you turn it, it puts a little torsion on that and it makes a little clunk. It means absolutely nothing. The noise will probably go away for a while now, but it'll come back. You can keep spraying it. If you do want to fix it, go to Toyota. They're the only ones that sell it. You take the shock off, take the spring off, you'd buy new insulators, put them on each end and put it back together again. But it means absolutely nothing. It's going to hurt anything. Like I said, my grandson's has been doing it since he bought it, and it doesn't matter. The main thing this thing needs is new front tires, because the insides are worn on both sides, and a front end alignment. These Tundras can last forever, 400,000 or 500,000 miles. This has only got like 160. It's, yeah, running a little bit lean. You can change the mass airflow sensor, but a lot of people like it that way. You get a little bit better gas mileage. Since this runs good, if you made it run less lean, it would get worse gas mileage. I've had some of these that I fixed. They were running too lean, and then after I fixed them, the customer said my gas mileage went down. So I'd leave that alone. Here we have a soldier's Nissan Titan. It's getting too hot. It's not getting to the H, but it's running too hot when the AC is on and when he's driving in traffic. You know, on the highway it works perfectly fine. So let's start with the basic analysis of an overheating vehicle. And of course, the first thing to do is to check the coolant. If it's low on coolant, it could easily cause the problem at low speeds. It could not overheat at high speeds, but overheat at low speeds because as you're spinning the engine faster, the coolant goes through the system quicker. And even if you're a little low, it'll still work okay, but at idle it won't. So these crazy systems, the real radiator pressure cap is here. So first thing we do is take that off. You can see it's full inside. This cap is to check the radiator. As you can see, it's not a regular radiator cap. It doesn't have a spring or anything. It's just a cap. And as we see, it's pretty much full inside there too. Now I asked the owner, has he had to add coolant to the system, antifreeze water mix? And he said no. We know it's not leaking. Normally, the next thing I'd do would be a pressure test of the coolant system with my pump system, but really, he said he's not losing any coolant. If you got a leak, you're gonna lose coolant. So the system's sealed. There's not a problem with that. And next, normally I'd do one of these combustion leak tests where I'd put the blue liquid in here, run the engine, and see if the blue blue turns yellow, showing that there's exhaust gas, and the radiator showing a blown head gasket or cracked head. The car overheats with the AC on and idling for long periods of time. If it was a blowing head gasket, the faster you go, the worse it'll get. The faster you go, there's more pressure, the engine's spinning faster, it would build the exhaust gas up even faster, and it would overheat worse at high speeds than at idle. So if it's a blown head gasket, it wouldn't have as much problem at idle, it would have a worse problem at high speed. And in this case, at high speed, it has no problem at all. So we know it's not a blown head gasket. It would be much worse the faster you go. So something's up in the system that doesn't leak. Now, maybe it's a stuck thermostat. The thermostats, when they're cold like this one, you can see it's stuck shut. As the engine heats up, it opens up and lets coolant from the radiator get into the engine to cool the engine. It's to warm them up faster. If it's stuck shut, it won't send any coolant to the engine from the radiator, and it'll overheat. But when they're stuck shut, they overheat pretty fast, and then they just stay overheated. And again, same as if the head gasket was blown. If you have a stuck thermostat, it'll overheat at low speeds, but it will overheat even worse at high speeds because you need more coolant spinning through the fast spinning engine to dissipate all that heat from the engine running at higher RPMs. It would overheat like mad if it was stuck at high speeds, and in this case, at high speeds it runs totally normal. What can it be? Well, it could be the fans aren't working right to cool the engine. So I'll start it up, turn the AC on, and we'll check the speed using our wind speed indicator. You can use your hand too, I can feel a lot of air coming out of here. Now this thing is rated at 5.68 miles per hour at idle. It's 5.67. That's certainly close enough. And really, for those of you without one of these gauges, you can get it for 25 bucks on Amazon, but put your hand here. I feel a ton of air. That fan's blowing. But in this case, it's a mechanical fan. It runs off the water pump. Most vehicles these days have electric, 1 or 2 electric cooling fans instead of a mechanical one, because they're more efficient, they work better. But you can test them the same way. Turn on the AC, make sure they're both blowing good. But in this case, I found out there's a flaw. The soldier who owns the car told me he was in a wreck and they didn't replace the condenser fan for the AC system. There's supposed to be a cooling fan in here, and as you can see, there isn't one. It's gone. But when you look closely, there's a lot of bugs stuck in there. So we're gonna clean those off first. So out comes my unbeatable Honda powered pressure washer. It's a Honda, so you know it's gonna start. The pressure washer, and in this case we're losing a lower pressure nozzle. You don't want too much pressure. To clean all the bugs off. And since it doesn't have the electric fan that goes on the condenser, which pushes the air through the condenser to cool the AC and helps push air through the radiator, which of course is behind the condenser, and make it work. So we're gonna hook this thing up right in front of the condenser, then turn it on full blast. We want it on high. Then we'll go inside the truck, start it up with the AC on full blast. There it is, recirc. And we'll see what happens to the temperature gauge. Before it was going up all the way up to that notch that's under the H. Now it hasn't damaged anything yet because it has to get to the H when it boils, then it damages the engine. As long as it doesn't boil, it hasn't damaged the engine yet. So it hasn't done any damage. We're gonna let it sit for half an hour, 40 minutes, and check it every once in a while and see if it stays normal now. It sits so hot today, the end of July in Tennessee. Look at a nice cool glass of water in a nice air-conditioned Nissan Titan and sit here for half an hour and watch it. Now, after 10 minutes, you can see it's still running good. Now, I can just about guarantee you that's the problem because it's logical. They didn't put the cooling fan for the condenser on after the wreck. It was designed that way. On the highway, yeah, you're going 60 miles an hour. You got 60-mile-an-hour wind, plenty enough to cool it off. But in the city, no. Especially when you're idling, it's gonna make it overheat, especially when you turn the AC on. The heat of the AC is ejected by the condenser that's in front of the radiator. So it puts a bunch of heat in front of the radiator. The condenser gets super hot. Then the air passes over the condenser, and then, since it's in front of the radiator, that hotter air goes through the radiator. Well, that extra heat is going to make it not work right if there isn't more wind pushing it through. And of course, when you're going 60 miles an hour, you got 60-mile-an-hour wind going through the condenser, going through the radiator, cooling it off. But I still don't trust anything, so I'm going to wait half an hour to see if it changes. And in the meantime, I can see his tire pressure monitoring system light is on. There it is. So we might as well check that. I can't just sit here drinking water, cooling off for half an hour. I'd be bored out of my mind. There we go, plug in the scan tool. You need a decent one one to do TPMS. The really cheap ones won't help. We'll plug it in. There we go. Now, unfortunately, even this scan tool won't do the TPMS, so I need a better one. What the heck? I like trying out scan tools, seeing what works and what doesn't. So, here's my new Think Car one that I've gotten recently. This new one is called Think Tool PD8. We'll see how it works. And it shows this doesn't do automatic detection, this particular model. They're blaming it on the manufacturer, so we'll have to put it in manually. We can see the BCM has problems. It's got a code, 4 of them. They all say low voltage. Weak batteries often do that. Even with all this information, if you notice, there is not a tire pressure monitoring service information on this scan tool either. So we're going to do what I always have to do. I'm going to have to get the actual tire pressure monitoring computer to check it out, a TPMS checker. Well, there's a life of a mechanic for you. Now, I got out here my Autel Max TPMS, and it plugs in. I always seem to get them upside down. There we go, that's plugged in. Now we'll see what this baby does. Here we go. We want to check it out. Yes, TPMS. Okay, what do we got? Nissan. Go up to Nissan. Diagnostics. Yes, taking an awful lot of time. The front left has low battery. The right rear has low battery. The right left has low battery. And there's no data from the front left. Now, this is the problem with these stupid systems. 3 of the 4 wheels have low voltage, and 1 has none at all. Since the front left has no data at all, that means the front left sensor is either broken or its battery is completely dead. The other ones are warning that they're low. So here's how stupid it is. If you took it apart and replaced the front left one, the other 3 are low. They're going to go out soon. They're all made at the same time, right? You'd have to replace all 4. It costs a fortune. So I just say get yourself a $10 little gauge to check your tire pressure with. A tire pressure gauge. Fixing this is going to cost a ton of money to fix it good, because if you change the front left one, sure, it'll start working, but then the other 3 soon are going to go out because it says their batteries are low. At least now you know how the stupid systems work, that you're going to need a really specialized tool to check them, not even a good scan tool. Most of them won't even read them. I'll just live with this one. Well, it's been about 40 minutes now messing with those things, so let's check the overheating problem. Well, as we look at the gauge, it certainly is not overheating anymore. So yeah, putting this fan in front to take place of the condenser fan that isn't there from the wreck fixed the whole problem. Now, the customer's a soldier. He's pinching pennies, so I told him, don't go buy the super expensive Nissan fan. They want a ton for those things. Go to AutoZone, O'Reilly, any discount auto parts store, and get an electric fan. Mount it there. Put a toggle switch in the dash. Put in a 20 amp fuse. You can turn it on when you want, when you're in traffic. Turn it off on a highway. Who knows? It was wrecked in the front. Maybe it even damaged the computer. You might buy a new fan and hook it up the way it was set up and it won't work. You just get a fan. They're less than $100 usually. Put a fan there, some wire, toggle switch, and a fuse. Then you got simplicity itself. Or go buy all the Nissan parts and spend a fortune. It's your choice. At least you know how you can fix them now. Here I got a 2001 Dodge Stratus, and you can all learn from this man's sad experience with a repair shop. Now, he inherited it from his parents, and you can see, you know, it's a typical Dodge. They get older, the paint starts feeling off of them because they didn't paint them right, and things fade off. But it was a good transportation car until he took it to this garage in Clarksville. It was older, had 117,000 miles. Now it's only got like 120,000 miles. And it was time to change the timing belt. And it's got this Mitsubishi 2.4 liter 16 valve engine that has a rubber timing belt. They're interference engines. They're not bad engines. They put out a reasonable amount of horsepower, but they're interference. So if that rubber timing belt gets to be old, and it was 19 years old, and mileage, I change it every 9 to 100. It was a little over 100. It's time to change the timing belt, because if the rubber belt breaks, the pistons hit the valves, goodbye engine. Now, this particular one is an interference engine because it's a single overhead cam engine. If it had been the double overhead cam engines, they are not interference engines. I mean, regardless, you got to change the timing belt every 100,000 miles anyways, but this particular one is an interference engine. So he was being wise, changing the belt. So he takes it to the garage, right? And they hit him for almost $800. It was $775, and they said they replaced the timing kit and everything, but they didn't do such a hot job. In this particular Mitsubishi design, the balance shaft keeps the engine from vibrating when you're idling. Relatively powerful 4-cylinder engines, they had a tendency of shaking and idling, so they put the balance shaft in it to balance it out. Obviously, when the guy put it together, he didn't time the balancing shafts correctly. You got to put the timing belt on to time the cam, but you also have to do the balance shaft as a belt, and that has to be set up perfectly. It counter rotates to keep it from vibrating, and that's time too. And if the timing on the counterbalance shafts is off, guess what it's going to do? It's going to shake like this thing does. As you can see, this thing shakes a lot. It runs okay, other than the shaking. The gas mileage is about the same as it always was. He took it back right away, and they said, oh, don't worry, the shaking will settle down after you drive it a while. Now, 4,000 miles later, car's still shaking exactly the same. I'm looking at this thing, and it says, technician was Eric. So I asked the customer here, I said, does Eric still work there? Well, the owner said, no, Eric, we had problems with Eric. You know, he would screw up too much, and we had to fire him. But he did a good job on your car. Now, come on now. He trusted this guy. Shouldn't have trusted the guy. How can you tell somebody fired the guy because he wasn't a good worker? But no, he didn't screw up your car, right? That's just the way that it goes. He didn't screw that up. He obviously did. He was in a hurry. He didn't do the job right. He didn't get the balance on. Maybe he doesn't even have the timing right. I'm assuming the timing is still good because it would get crappy gas mileage and wouldn't run right on the highway, which it runs okay, but it doesn't idle right. So let's hook up my fancy scan tool and see what's going on. All right, we got it plugged in. It's doing an auto link. Now there's no code, so we're gonna start it up. And we're gonna look at live data, LD. As you can see, the ignition time's moving around. 8, 10, 9, 10. And I'm not touching the accelerator, it's doing it by itself. It even went up to 11 once. It should not go 8, 9, 10, 11. And as you can see, now it hit 12. Okay, 8 to 12 at idle. That's totally unacceptable. You see, it's stable when we rev it up, but at idle, it is not stable. We'll let off the gas, and you'll see. Now it's moving around again. It's idling, it should stay the same, and it's not. It's going 8, it's going 9, 8, it's moving all over the place, 10. So obviously the timing wasn't even set right. Maybe the balance shaft is on or off. I can't get any data on this old thing. It won't show you anything about balance shaft data. There's no data for it. But it's shaking so much at idle. That's part of the problem too. But as you can see, the ignition timing isn't right either. So the whole job was botched up. Obviously the job wasn't done right. And the guy at the balls is saying, well, we fired the guy because he wasn't a good mechanic. But in your case, he did a good job. But basically the whole shop, I kind of renege on anything they do because of this. He's getting a bunch of squeaking on that side of the car. And they said, oh, yeah, you know, don't worry about it. It's a little of the power steering, nothing else is wrong. Well, he changed all these parts, these bushings and mounts, and guess what happened? After he changed those parts, the noise went away. So the bushings and parts are wrong. He misdiagnosed that too, whoever he had work on a car. It was a different mechanic because that guy didn't work there anymore. That's the problem with places that are either not honest or just plain incompetent. I'm assuming this is more incompetence in the first place. Runs decent enough, but I'm gonna take it for a road test and show you what else is wrong. It seems like the transmission's starting to go. So close the hood, take it for a little spin. Now it does shake quite a bit. We're gonna back it up and take it for a road test. So I feel like I'm in a 10. It's the typical Chrysler hood liner's garbage and it's all falling down, especially in the back there. And the owner just told me the turn signal in the front melted and fell off, but let's see how the tranny's going. Good thing for him, they don't do car inspections every year. They would never pass. You know, other than the shaking, it still runs okay, but he's worried about the transmission. And let it be known, these things are notorious for failure of transmissions, this kind of mileage, 121,000 miles. So we'll come to a stop here, and then we'll check out the transmission. Okay, we're at 0. Let's see how it goes. 1, 2, shifted kind of late. 3's really not shifting until I let go, then it shifts. I mean, it still runs, but you can see, 2nd to 3rd shifts too high, but when you're going 3rd to 4th, it really, you got to take your foot off the gas, otherwise it'll stay and it won't shift. That just basically shows the transmission's starting to go up. That's pretty typical on these with this kind of mileage. A lot of them don't even make it that far. But, I mean, step on the gas, it downshifts and goes. It's drivable, and considering the shape of the car, I just leave the thing alone. Now, he has changed the fluid filter himself. It didn't make any difference. These things just wear out, but cruising along, it goes good enough. I mean, it's a knock-around car, but he got ripped off by the guy that didn't do a good job when they did the timing belt. It's quite obvious. And the owner of the store just didn't stand behind it. They kept trying to sell him other stuff. I mean, let's face it. We got the wind flapping away. There's the headliner and the back window flopping all over the place where you're going down the road like a flag. And this part's practically being sucked out by like a tornado sucking it out. It's just coming apart. You can see the front of the hood where it's all really starting to peel off now. I mean, it still runs down the road, but basically, he got ripped off. And the owner of the shop basically, obviously doesn't care. In an old car like this is always going to be shaking a little idle anyway. Nobody's going to put too much money into one of these things. You roll the windows up, it's not all that noisy. I mean, yeah, when you come to an idle, it starts shaking and everything. Well, it's a plastic Dodge. What do you expect, you know? Everything here, and you see the dash is starting to come apart, fall apart. It's just plastic cheapness, that's all. And when you think about it, it doesn't have any trouble codes, which is really phenomenal for a 21-year-old Dodge. Normally they got all kinds of codes. It doesn't have any codes. Everything's green. Well, like I say, nobody's gonna put a bunch of money into this car. The hood release is broken. You open it from the front and you can see the paint's all coming off. But as far as I'm concerned, it could still be like one of those old Chrysler vans. They fall apart, but some guys are driving them while they're falling apart and they got a couple 100,000 miles. They're still going down the road. What the heck? It still doesn't go that bad. It's just a shame that the car was running fine and not shaking, and he took it into this guy, paid $780 for a job that, by the way, all data says it's a 3.5-hour labor job. So it's really not a $780 job. Be that as it may, they didn't do it right, and when he got it back, it started shaking. And they just said, oh, just wait a while, it'll go away. Now, don't ever let that happen to you. You take it and it shakes and it didn't shake before, make them fix it, or don't pay them and get your car back and go somewhere else. Now, this is totally safe to drive around. The transmission, yes, it's starting to go out. That's going to do it on its own. And it runs good enough. Gas mileage is about the same that it always was, he said. So, not a horrendous bad deal, but still, you get something shaking that didn't shake before, don't let it pass by, and then later they'll say, oh, well, that's too late now. There's nothing you can do about it. Do it right away. This is a big reason I tell people, if you ever get in a wreck, get in the car from the body shop. Do not sign the check until you road test that car. Tell them I'm taking it for a road test. I want to see what it's like. Do not give them the money, because once they get that money, too bad, they're not going to care, and you're SOL. You get in a situation like he does, it shakes right after you get the car back and it didn't shake before, take it back. Especially something like a timing belt. If it's not right off maybe one tooth or not tensioned correctly, it's going to make the engine idle poorly, which is exactly what this thing is doing. And you saw with my scan tool, the timing was bouncing all over the place, showing it wasn't done right. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.